My sister's boyfriend told my mom I shouldn't come to Thanksgiving. The next day, he walked into my office, and his face turned pale. My mother sent me a message on my phone, which lit up and buzzed when it arrived. The content of the message was so surprising that it almost caused me to drop my pen. At that moment, I was in the middle of signing a contract with a vendor. This year it would be best if you did not attend the Thanksgiving celebration, Cameron. You are the one that causes tension, according to Ethan. It would be best for you to not participate in this activity. I believed it to be a prank for a brief moment. In the course of around 1 month, my sister's new husband had gotten to know me, and for some reason he had already determined that I was the source of the problem. If he were only aware of that fact. Instead of responding in an aggressive manner, I put my phone face down, glanced at my assistant, and calmly stated, "Let's move this meeting to tomorrow." One thing you should know about me is that when people attempt to force me to leave, I don't yell or argue. I am relocated. I am the youngest woman in history to have managed a division valued at over $400 million. I am 29 years old and now the director of the Falcon Ridge Real Estate Group. My name is Cameron Brooks. However, no one in my family is aware of my actual job duties. They believe that I am employed in the real estate industry, such as selling tiny houses on the weekends. I gave up on attempting to provide a justification for my existence many years ago. The communication that I received from my mother was not a recent one. It was just the most raucous iteration to yet, the bright light, the favorite, the one whose decisions were treasured like gold. All of these descriptions have always applied to my sister, Chloe. I was the one who stayed silent yet never stopped working, yet I was still characterized as someone who gave it her all. However, Ethan, who had recently become her husband, was not the same as before. A man who craved all the attention that he could get his hands on, the sort of person who boasted about his large promotion, which was actually merely a transfer from the customer service department to the position of team leader, the one who seems to make himself feel taller by sizing people up. And, as it now seems, I was so wound up that I could not sit at the same table as him. I did not have a feeling of anger. I did not sustain any injuries. I had reached my limit. I did not waste my time trying to persuade individuals who were not interested in understanding me when my life was so vast, so overflowing, so burdensome. I remained in the office until late that evening, during which time I completed the last touches on the project figures, signed off on the approvals, and conducted simulations for the new executive tower construction that we were ready to make public. The work was something that I just adored. I had a feeling of full control when I was there. I was filled with a sense of complete clarity as I made my way across the deserted lobby, my heels resounding on the marble flooring, at 11:45 in the evening. If Ethan did not wish for me to be present for Thanksgiving, then that is acceptable. What he failed to anticipate was that I possessed a universe that was apart from my family. That universe, being far larger than his own, was something that he had never anticipated. The morning that followed was characterized by the same qualities as the previous one. It was rapid, abrupt, and loud. The constant influx of emails, the ringing of phones, and architects inquiring about final confirmations. Ava, who is my assistant, gave me a fresh stack of files. Cameron, who is responsible for the Skyline project, is arriving later than expected. The keys. However, she came to a halt. Her eyes widened in surprise. For a split second, I was completely immobilized as I made my turn. After that, I nearly let out a chuckle. Ethan was standing at the doorway. His face was bright red, he was sweating profusely, and he appeared to be absolutely dumbfounded. His entrance had the appearance of someone having pushed him from behind. His eyes were shifting back and forth between myself and the enormous corporate logo that was positioned behind my desk. Stumbling over his words, he said, "Dude, what is this thing?" I remained seated in my leather chair, without showing any sign of stress or anxiety, while he appeared to be in the midst of a terrifying dream. He must have believed that he would frighten or threaten me when he arrived. He discovered the actual location of my place of employment instead. The person who I truly was. "I hope you're having a good morning, Ethan," I remarked in a nonchalant manner. "Do you have a job at this place?" His voice shook as he shouted. "What is your occupation?" "You have authority over me." I lifted one of my eyebrows. "I am in charge of 3 different divisions. Therefore I concur. I guess it means I am the boss then. What brings you to this location?" It seemed as though he was on the verge of passing out. "I am here in order to speak with anyone regarding a meeting concerning investments. Chloe mentioned that her sister may perhaps provide assistance to us, but I believe that you were employed in the field of rentals." The verdict was right in front of him, slapping him across the face. I remained still, gathered together. It was his body that was trembling. "I told your mother that I shouldn't come to Thanksgiving," I said. "Is it true that my tone is even yet solid as a result of the fact that I wrecked the vibe?" All of the color in his cheeks had disappeared. Cameron, I did not intend to. I was unaware of what was happening. Did not have any knowledge of what. It was my question. The fact that I held a position of employment. The fact that I had a life, that I was not a disappointment that you could bully. He continued to stare at the glass wall that was located at my back, and then he swallowed hard. The one that demonstrated how every single person on the whole floor was functioning under my supervision. It was as if I could watch his ego disintegrating brick by brick. His finger, which was trembling, was directed at me. For what reason? Why did you not inform anybody that you were this? I gave him a little grin. Nobody posed the question. He blinked his eyes, momentarily at a loss for words. He attempted to open his mouth, but unable to do so. He then tried to close it, but again was unsuccessful. Eventually, he managed to open it, but still could not make a sound. Following his entrance, Ava approached me and whispered something to me. Is it necessary for me to contact security? However, I dismissed her with a wave. Ethan did not pose a threat. All he was a man who had made a miscalculation regarding another individual. I didn't come here to deal with this, he grumbled as he ran his fingers over his forehead. We require both a loan and an investor, so I arrived. It is possible that you might persuade somebody to provide us with whatever it is that Chloe indicated that you might be able to persuade them to give us. I lifted my hand to silence him. Ethan, allow me to clarify one thing emphatically. I do not combine my personal life with my professional life, and I do not offer assistance to anyone who make me feel insignificant. It seemed as though I had just turned the entire universe on its head, and he gave me a glare that reflected his confusion. He instantly said, "You are not allowed to do this. Are you acquainted with my identity by any chance?" Oh, such a predictable statement. With careful intention, I rose to my feet gradually. Not filled with rage, but rather with might. I nodded in agreement as I responded. Yes, you are the one who attempted to prevent me from attending Thanksgiving dinner. His mouth clenched. Although I suppose that was unexpected for you. I went on to say that the individual you attempted to exclude would be seated in the office in which you are now pleading to enter. He stopped talking and became utterly still. Then, without any warning, he began to scream. Just a scream of frustration. Not even a coherent word was spoken. The type that you release when the reality that you have constructed falls apart before your very eyes. Every person who was on the floor turned around to have a look. You put me to shame, he said as he jabbed his finger in my direction, his face becoming a deep shade of crimson. I didn't even blink in response. I responded in a calm voice with the word, no. He left in a huff, closing the door with such force that the glass shook and said, "You embarrassed yourself." After a little pause, Ava re-entered the scene. With her eyes wide open, she answered, "Well." After taking a deep breath, I spoke the words, "You do not have a clue, and this is simply the beginning." This was due to the fact that he believed the shame had reached its conclusion at this point. There was no way for him to know what would happen in the immediate future. Not retribution motivated by rage, but revenge motivated by truth, and the truth always delivers a greater impact. As soon as Ethan left my office in a huff, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere of the room. Everybody was aware of the events that had place, but people appeared to continue with their job as usual. It is impossible to truly conceal a mature guy who is wailing like a kid in the heart of a business building. I did not pursue him. There was no necessity for me to do so. I moved over to the glass wall that gave me a view of downtown and stood there till my pulse rate returned to normal. Ego was not a factor in this situation. The issue at hand concerned the matter of clarity. Ethan was able to finally see the part of me that he believed did not exist. He detested it, but it gave him power, stability, and freedom. I heard my phone vibrating after a period of 18 minutes. Chloe is a wonderful friend who is always there for you. Despite the fact that I contemplated ignoring it, I still responded. The sound of her voice was shrill. "Cameron, what have you done with Ethan?" In a rage, he stormed into the house. I made no attempt to raise my voice. I am completely innocent. Without making an appointment, he appeared at my place of employment, where he shouted in front of my coworkers and insisted that I give him money. Nobody made a sound. An answer delivered with so much composure was the last thing that Chloe was anticipating. It was at that moment that she lost her sanity. I could have been more kind. I was close to laughing. He let Mom know that I need not to attend the Thanksgiving celebration. The reason for this is that he believes you make assumptions about other people. You emanate an aura of intimidation. I shut my eyes. The hurt that the irony caused was indescribable. "Chloe," I spoke in a kind voice. "It is possible that he has a tendency to feel intimidated, since he tends to underestimate the people that are around him." She did not give any sort of reply. She chose to end the conversation at that point instead. I paused in my tracks for a brief minute, and then I became aware of something. Being a nuisance is not the reason my family refused to accept me. They chose not to accept me because I had evolved beyond the version of myself that they were at ease with. It was well. They could retain their little representation of me as life had grander intentions in store. Ava entered the room with a hefty packet in her hands. She arrived at that moment in the evening when I was concluding my examination of the final drawings of the Skyline project. "This came through a private courier," she explained to reporters. "I can assure you that this is from legal," I said before opening it. The paperwork that was kept within has a header that read, "Ethan Carter Background Report." "Not from you, but requested." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Who is it that has requested this?" was the question that I put forward. For a moment, Ava held back. "Your mother," the crier announced. After that, I blinked my eyes. The same woman who informed me that I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving is my mother. I had a sense of distrust that was becoming stronger, which caused my heart to stiffen. I came to an abrupt halt as soon as I scanned through the file. Ethan had accumulated a great deal of debt, including personal loans, previous credit card defaults, and a software firm that collapsed, which he made no mention of. To make matters even worse, he had lately submitted an application for a private investment loan, and he had done so under Chloe's identity. I carefully took a seat. His visit to my office was a result of it. The reason he didn't want me around for Thanksgiving was that he didn't want me anywhere near my own family in case they found out that he was exploiting them. And that section was not even the most terrible thing about it. There was a message written by my mother in a trembling hand at the bottom of the report. I didn't know who else to ask. If he hurts Chloe financially, please protect her. It immediately struck me in the face. The reason my mother was pushing me away was not because she wanted to. She was there to keep Ethan from hurting my sister. Or at least that is what she was attempting to do. She was scared that if I were to confront him, he would act in a certain way. I was overcome with an odd combination of melancholy and something more intense. They had not yet placed their faith in me. Not sufficient to address me in a forthright manner. They did not feel confident enough to request assistance publicly, but they did place their faith in me to investigate Ethan without his knowledge. They had enough faith in me to have the expectation that I would take action to address the matter. I carefully shut the file. All right then. They would have precisely what they were hoping for if they were hoping to keep me away from Thanksgiving. I exited the office, picked up my coat, and immediately made my way to the one location where this situation might come to a conclusion. Ethan and Chloe's residence. Not to argue, not to yell, and to do this task, for he believed that yelling in my office was the most terrible moment of his whole life. When he opened the door to that residence, he had absolutely no idea what lay in store for him. I had parked my car on the street in front of Chloe and Ethan's residence at the same time as the sun was lowering. The windows allowed a warm light to shine through. It gave the impression of being tranquil from the outside. That is ideal. The sort of existence that my mother constantly hoped that Chloe would experience. A beautiful home, a wonderful spouse, and a bright future are all within reach. It is unfortunate because none of it was genuine. I had a file under my arm as I made my way up the driveway. The door flew open on its own before I even had the chance to knock on it. As soon as Ethan's eyes landed on me, he began to breathe in a heavy manner, and his eyes widened in surprise. You cannot be here, he barked, putting his whole body in front of the door to prevent me from entering. I maintained a cool demeanor while I smiled. Move. I lifted the envelope just a little bit since he did not do it. Unless you would rather that Chloe open this up in my place. He lost all of the color in his face instantaneously. His voice trembled as he questioned. What? What is that? It was your past, I said in response. Or should I say, this is a gift for you. His eyes were filled with terror as he took a step back. It was not due to my actions. Rather, it was because he had a perfect understanding of the contents of the folder. I did not hesitate to obtain permission before I stepped inside. In the kitchen, Chloe was stirring something that she was cooking on the stove. She wasn't foolish, so she didn't listen to Britt's warning not to pay attention to what she was saying. Instead, she heard Ethan rushing by her and saying, "Britt, don't listen to her. She's trying to create problems." I placed the folder on top of the dining table, and she, after taking a single glance at his face, quietly asked, "What did you do?" "Her mother sent this." Chloe's head jerked in my direction. Her mother? That's right. It was her who hired a private investigator to look into him. Ethan's voice trembled. I interjected to say, "No, that is not correct." She had previously stated, "She hates me." Chloe's hands were shaking as she grabbed for the folder. "She didn't trust what you were hiding," she said. Ethan made a sudden move toward the front. My voice was loud enough to cut through the room as I said, "Don't open that," and moved in between them. "Touch her again and I walk out of this house and deliver this file to her employer, her bank, and every investor you've approached." Ethan immediately stopped breathing. The folder was accessed by Chloe. The hush that came after was almost too much to bear. One after another, the pages listed the following: loans, defaults, failing businesses, additional debts, and his application for a private investment loan under her name. "Ethan, please let me know that this is not happening," she begged. In a state of desperation, he raised his hand. "Baby Chloe, listen to me. All I wanted was some assistance for us, for our future," he pleaded. "No," she said, her voice trembling. He turned his gaze on me at that moment, his eyes blazing with rage, and said, "For your mess, I did not move my eyes from you. You are the one who plotted this. You are out to destroy my life. You ruined your own life when you tried to drag my family into your debt." His chest rose, and he balled his hands into fists as if he were once more on the verge of screaming. However, Chloe moved herself in front of me, and a sense of wildness was ignited inside her. She commanded him to leave her residence. He became immobilized. "What? You heard me. Leave." At that moment, for the very first time, his expression conveyed a real sense of fear. "But where will I go?" "That's not my problem," she responded in response. He made an attempt for the final time. Chloe said in a whisper, "No, she won't." He walked out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him, and said, "She'll finally understand why Cameron didn't come to Thanksgiving." Tears were on the verge of spilling over as Chloe faced me. "Why didn't you tell us who you really are? What you really do?" I let out a deep breath. At that point she began to sob and put her body weight on mine as she said, "Because you never asked. Not in the role of my sister, who was fortunate enough to have everything, but in the capacity of a person who has finally come to recognize the reality." She whispered to him, "Would you like to stay for dinner?" I gave a sign with my head. "Yes, I am here. However, the true moment of retribution was going to happen the following day. It would not be a big or boisterous event. Rather, it would be one that would be etched in memory. The morning of Thanksgiving dawned with that crisp holiday coolness that always felt reassuring. This year, however, it brought with it something novel. There was clarity, there was strength, and there was a sense that everything was finally coming together. I dressed myself in a straightforward navy suit, pulled my hair back and grabbed the folder that my mother had sent to me. It was not to expose Ethan. That portion was already finished. I was bringing it for an alternative reason. It was a truth that my family required to hear from me, not from assumptions or whispered conversations. The moment that I arrived at my mother's house and pulled into the driveway, the scent of food wafted through the open windows. Laughter could be heard coming from inside the house. It was the same old familiar sound, but this time, as soon as I stepped onto the porch, the door flew open before I even had the chance to knock. My mother was standing there, staring at me with wide eyes, her breath catching in her chest. "Cameron," she murmured, as though she wasn't certain that I was real. I spoke in a composed tone and said, "I heard you weren't expecting me." Her voice cracked as she said, "I was at a loss for what to do. He mentioned that you and Ethan did not get along, and Chloe appeared to be pleased, and you believed him." I completed the sentence for her. She shut her eyes as she felt the weight of her guilt. "I apologize," she said. "I didn't want the day to turn into an argument," she said. Confrontation, not truth nor protection, but just confrontation was something she was always afraid of. Today was not the day for fighting, as I pointed out by saying, "I know, and that's why I'm here." She appeared to be confused, but she stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The home was warm and filled with voices. However, the moment everyone saw me, they all fell silent. "I thought she wasn't going to come," my aunt murmured. Chloe emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. She appeared more robust and lucid today. Without hesitation, she approached me and embraced me with force, leaving all of us, including my mother, utterly flabbergasted. "She confided in me about everything," Chloe murmured. My mother's gaze shifted back and forth between us. "Everything. Here's the folder," I told her as I gave it to her. "You were concerned, which is why you employed someone to investigate Ethan. Here you are. This is everything you asked for, and you don't have to worry about it anymore," Mom said, opening it gently. Her palm shook as she read the first page. What was he planning to do with Chloe's name? With a look of horror on her face, she muttered, "Have her accumulate debt in order to make amends for his previous errors," Chloe said on my behalf. Gasps echoed across the room. Mother put her palm on her breast, and her feelings spilled over. "Oh my God, Cameron," she said, when Cameron confronted him and he confessed to it. "It would have been better if I had taken your advice. You ought to have confidence in your own abilities." I shook my head and said, "I should have put my faith in you. You were aware that there was a problem. You were simply afraid of making the incorrect decision." She took a step forward, with tears welling up in her eyes. "And I made the decision to exclude you from my life. This is the time that I had been waiting for. I was not seeking retribution or satisfaction. I just wanted to be honest. I'm not angry," I murmured quietly. "However, you should not cut me out to protect someone else again." I grinned as she firmly stated, "You're staying for dinner. No more excuses," as she embraced me tightly in an embrace that she hadn't bestowed upon me in years. With a laugh, Chloe shouted from the living room, "Mom's about to burn the turkey again." The room was filled with warm, genuine laughter. Laughter that was finally genuine. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like the outsider. I felt like the daughter, the sister, the protector, the person who showed up when it mattered. And as we gathered around the table, plates full, voices loud, I understood something. The act of retribution was not the confrontation. It was not exposing Ethan. It was not proving myself. The true revenge was finding happiness. Right in the place where they had earlier felt I did not belong. My family tried to steal my inheritance in Nye. I exposed their financial crimes. This is the end of your empire. They spent New Year's in panic. My sister's scream broke through the champagne pops and music at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. "We are done, oh my God." My mom struck the marble floor with the force of a brick sack. My father's face was as white as the sand in the desert as he remained motionless. "Eva, where the hell are you?" He had been yelling into the phone 4 minutes prior. I responded coolly and collectedly. Was my gift well received by the family? Eva Kensington is my name. I'm 30 years old, and I own a posh ceramic studio in Phoenix. I'm the failure who makes a career playing in mud to the Kensingtons of North Scottsdale, Arizona's largest real estate family. For years they told me that I would never be as good as my brother, the CFO, or my ideal sister. They were unaware that I had been surreptitiously monitoring every dime they attempted to conceal from me for the last 4 years. At precisely 11:15 p.m., that one package was delivered. Everything changed on December 31st. It all began 12 days prior when I returned home early to assist with the largest New Year's Eve celebration the desert had ever witnessed, with the hope that this year would be different. Please share your tale in the comments if you have ever had family members who disapproved of you for following your own path. From where are you watching? I read each and every one of them. Watch closely to see what happened next. Not even I could have written a script. My mom's SMS message remained unanswered on my phone 12 days before to New Year's Eve. "Eva, get home early. This will be the largest party to date. I need everyone here, from the canyons to the ocean." It was the first time in years that she had made such a nearly plaintive request for assistance. In my studio, surrounded by half-glazed vases, I gazed at the screen while I waited for the kiln. Perhaps she was implying that things might change. So I set the gas on my old Jeep, packed a duffel with a few changes of clothes, wrapped the piece of handcrafted pottery I had been storing for Dad, and a sleek obsidian bowl carved with saguaro outlines. The Superstition Mountains were no longer visible in the distance as the sprawl gave way to gated communities and golf course greens during the little less than 1.5-hour drive from Phoenix to North Scottsdale. By late afternoon the sun had set and the desert horizon was a blaze of orange as I pulled down the long gravel path. Flanked with ironwood trees, the house's flat roof blended with the McDowell Peaks, and it loomed ahead like a stone and glass castle. A hired fireworks scaffold was rising close to the outdoor amphitheater. Workers in khakis were stringing LED lights around the edge of the infinity pool, and enormous white tents were being erected on the back lawn for the overflow crowd, all of which I could see from the gate. It was more than simply a celebration. Every branch of the family that mattered, including developers from Los Angeles and investors from Dallas, were drawn to the Kensington's yearly proclamation of dominance. I parked next to the 6-car garage, picked up the covered bowl and my purse, and made my way to the front doors. Before I knocked, they flew open, and Sophia, our 15-year housekeeper, was standing there with her apron covered in flour from whatever she had been preparing in the kitchen. "Miss Eva, look at you. It's been too long." Her silver cross necklace was chilly against my cheek as she quickly embraced me. When Mom wasn't looking, Sophia would sneak me additional tamales and ask insightful questions about my most recent glazing experiments. She had always been the one bright light in my life. "Your mom's out back with the event planner. Come in." I entered the refreshing marble entryway. Something lemony was baking somewhere in the house, and the air was fragrant with fresh sage from the diffusers. The location had undergone yet another makeover. The walls are covered in fresh abstract paintings of deserts. Over the stairs is a huge copper chandelier that most likely cost more than my annual rent. As always, it struck me. Every square foot of this wealth, which was based on luxury flips and land deals, screamed domination. However, I suppressed the thought and concentrated on the bowl I was holding. Perhaps at last, Dad would grasp it and feel the weight of the clay I had poured myself. The saguaro in the back was framed by floor-to-ceiling windows as Sophia guided me through the living area. From the kitchen came voices. Regarding caviar stations and ice creations, planners are giving directions. With her clipboard in hand and her blonde bob looking flawless as ever, Mom came out of the hallway wearing white linen as if she had already posed for the party pictures. "Ava, you made it." She looked at my jeans and linen shirt as if she were pricing out an open house, but she didn't give me a hug. Words like gravel under tires came out. "Guest suites ready in the east wing. Your old room's under renovation, turning it into a home gym. We need the space for the trainers coming in." I had owned that room for 20 years. I had painted the terracotta walls myself. My first crooked mugs from high school pottery class were arranged on shelves. It was simply space now. The lump in my throat was swallowed. She hardly looked at the wrapped item, saying, "Sounds practical, Mom. I brought something for Dad. Thought he'd like to see it before the chaos. He's in his study with Lucas and the others finalizing numbers for the toast speech. Don't interrupt unless it's quick." The same businesslike tone while dealing with underbidding she employed contractors. With the bowl now heavy in my arms, I nodded and went down the corridor. A small amount of warm lamplight spilled out of the open study door, and faint voices could be heard over the opening. My father's comment stopped me dead as I lifted my hand to knock. Eva needs to face facts. That mud hobby of hers isn't pulling in more than a few thousand a month, if that. My breath caught when I heard, "We're doing this for her own good." I froze, feeling like lead all of a sudden as my hand hovered over the bowl. I could see them through the opening. Silver hair catches the desk lamp as my father, David Kensington, leans back in his leather chair. Catherine, my mother, sitting on the armrest, her clipboard gone. Tapping figures into a tablet is my 34-year-old brother Lucas, who is currently the company's CFO. Olivia, my 31-year-old sister, is a real estate lawyer who smiled and signed off on every transaction. And a man I didn't recognize in a clean suit stood across from them. The briefcase of the financial advisor they had brought in from Denver revealed spreadsheets. "It's perfect timing," Lucas remarked, his voice as smooth as the swirling scotch in his glass. "New Year's Eve, full house, aunts, uncles, the whole network." David gives the speech about family unity. Then we pivot. Show her the projections. Her studio versus a real entry-level spot at Kensington Properties. Entry-level marketing. 80,000 base benefits. She signs the relinquishment right there in front of everyone. Dad raised his eyebrows. "Exactly. The intervention was planned. You take care of the emotional aspect, Catherine. Show worry for her future. Make it sound like hard love." Mom softened her voice just enough to sell it as she leaned in. The advisor cleared his throat and turned a page, saying, "We'll say we've worried for years watching her waste that business degree on crafts, but we're here to help her get back on track. Financially, it's airtight based on her apartment size and no visible assets. She's scraping by on 40,000 annually tops. Compare that to corporate stability. She'll see reason. And the trust transferred 30 million into the Cayman vehicle by quarter's end protects the core holdings from instability." He looked at Lucas, who grinned at Eva's erratic behavior. Olivia chuckled sharply and intelligently. "You mean can't have her suing for a bigger slice when she finally wakes up? Oh, please remember Thanksgiving. She shows up in that thrift store caftan talking about her glaze firing schedule like it's a board meeting. If we don't step in now, she'll drag the whole name down. The Whitman's girl just made partner at her firm and our sister's finger painting pots for Etsy." My legs crumbled. The bowl held tight to my chest like a shield as I pressed against the wall. They were doing more than simply rejecting my work. I was being erased. The act of giving up any claim to the family trust, which Dad had stated would be equal shares upon each of us 30th birthdays. And right in front of me, the Cayman transfer conceals assets abroad. For years, I had been suspicious of Dad's avoidance of estate planning inquiries. However, this was a form of protection disguised as theft. Dad said, safeguarding from the daughter who dared to create instead of close deals. His voice became softer. Glasses clinked in agreement as the audience grew silent. Once she signs, we move fast. Sophia clears the old room that night. Tools, sketches, all of it to storage or donation. No more half measures. She commits or she walks away clean. Olivia elevated hers to new beginnings for everyone. A noise began to grow in my ears as heat poured onto my face. 30 million. I chose clay over contracts, which resulted in the loss of my inheritance. With a gentle thump against the rug, the bowl fell out of my numb fingers. The loudness was sufficient, but I managed to catch it just in time. Inside, a chair scratched. A wave of panic swept through. The truth was burning in my chest, and I couldn't face them like this. Silently retreating, I turned and snuck by the kitchen, where Sophia was humming over tamales, without anyone noticing. I still had my stuff by the front entrance. I took hold of it, carefully opened the big oak, and entered the cool darkness of the desert. As I eased down the drive, the Jeep's motor switched over, soft lighting cutting through the dusk. I was driven back toward Phoenix by the sound of tires on blacktop without any farewells or explanations. I was unable to untie the dish that was still wrapped on the passenger seat. With my hands shaking too much to continue driving, I stopped at the first rest area off the I-10. Under a starry sky, the engine clicked as it cooled. After turning off the headlights, I finally started crying. The second ring was heard by Grace. I could hardly talk when I said, "Ava, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Where are you?" She wasted little time on consolation when she said, "They're cutting me out completely publicly." "New Year's Eve," I said. "Tell me exactly what you heard." "The disinheritance papers, the 30 million that came in trust to the gym conversion." There was silence from her side. "Then you still have the forensic files." 3 years earlier, I had engaged a discreet accounting company in Tempe when Dad misplaced a folder of trust documents I needed for my taxes. Since then, they had been giving me copies. Ledgers of shell companies, bank transfers, and emails exchanged between Lucas and the advisor. I already had 70% of the puzzle in my safe. I wiped my face, turned on the ignition, and merged back onto the deserted highway as Grace's voice steadied me. "You're 50 minutes from the studio. Get home. We finished this." When I rolled up the metal gate, the warehouse district was completely silent. I turned the work lights on. Pieces had shipped off weeks before, and the empty spaces where rows of shelves gleamed. Warmth from the day's firing was still emanating from one kiln. Instead of defeat, the area smelt of accomplishment and silica. After kicking off my shoes, I headed directly to the office corner. Behind a pile of blank slabs was the safe. When the combination turned, the door opened. 2 encrypted drives, 3 huge expandable folders, and a printed chronology that I had highlighted with red pen. I lay everything out on the large table where I often cut bowls. Transfers began 20 months ago, according to bank statements. Every Friday, round numbers are sent through the Caymans. Lucas's emails to the advisor. A draft of the new trust amendment with my name crossed out in black marker with the words, "Make sure Eva never sees these." The studio's actual numbers, which my family had never requested, appeared when I opened my laptop. 900,000 gross for the previous fiscal year. 1.5 million private commissions from collectors in Dubai, London, and half of the tech wives in San Francisco are anticipated this year. I hadn't disclosed any financial flow because I didn't require their consent. It was 3:12 a.m. on the wall clock. The celebration is in 7 days. 7 days to tie up all the loose ends, fill in the remaining 25% of the gaps, and package it in a way they won't soon forget. I started making calls after brewing coffee strong enough to remove glazing. Quiet ones. The first ring was answered by the forensic accountant. He had been anticipating. I was owed a favor by a tax lawyer I had met at a gallery opening. By morning, I had scheduled appointments and scheduled a delivery service on the 31st. Light filtered through the tall windows as I stood in the center of the studio. Even though the shelves appear empty to them, the proof that is now strewn all over the table was paid for by every sold-out collection and missing vase. They sought to demonstrate my financial ruin. I was going to demonstrate the reverse and bring down the entire house of cards. The choice felt like a perfectly balanced lump of clay in my chest. Stop wishing that they would change. No more doubting my value. The line had been painted in the sand by them. I was going to bury them in it. I was already seated in my downtown tax lawyer's office the following morning. When we first met at an opening in Scottsdale, Elliot Grant was dressed in the same navy suit. Across the glass table, he slipped a new legal pad. I threw both drives and 3 folders in front of him and said, "Show me what you've got." He gave a low whistle. "You weren't kidding. This is a federal case wrapped in a bow." We cross-referenced each transfer for 4 hours. He pointed out the signed amendment page that locked me out, 2 wire confirmations, and the last missing parts. Before lunch, his paralegal retrieved them from public files. The binder was notarized in triplicate, tabbed, highlighted, and 250 pages thick by 2 o'clock. The delivery was accompanied by 2 encrypted USBs. 1 backup, 1 master. Elliot reclined. He didn't protest when I asked, "Are you certain you want to deliver this on the 31st, 11:15 sharp, just before the countdown?" My next destination was the South Phoenix custom wood shop where I had previously purchased gallery crates. Last spring, the owner owed me $12,000 for an installation. I drew the box on butcher paper using brass hinges, blind dovetails, and black walnut. The lid has the Kensington crest laser etched on it. The interior features a velvet tray for the drives, a recessed binder section, and a charcoal suede lining. He promised discreet white glove delivery on the 31st and completion in 7 days. After making a cash payment, I departed. I opened the group chat I had maintained since college once I was back at the studio. The 4 people who never ever referred to my work as a hobby are Grace, Ben, Lily, and Max. In a matter of seconds, Grace responded to my text. Need the Red Rock. House in Sedona for New Year's Eve. 12 of us max. Money, no object. Ben sent a champagne emoji, saying, already booked it last month when you said you might bail on family. You're welcome. The VBO link was dropped by Lily. Max had only written, we've got your back always. I booked private chefs, a mixologist, and a local band that played desert rock under the stars. The villa had a heated infinity pool overlooking the canyons and enough bedrooms that no one had to share. I paid the full amount up front, no cancellation. It was nighttime. I sat at the glazing table with my favorite fountain pen and a single sheet of heavy cream stock as the warehouse lights buzzed overhead. I took my time writing, carefully crafting each letter. David, Catherine, Lucas, Olivia. You spent years telling me I would never be enough. Tonight you'll learn what enough actually costs. The originals are already with the IRS and the family trust attorney. What you're holding are copies. Happy New Year. I'm not gonna do another one. Eva. After wiping off the ink, I folded the page once and placed it inside a cream envelope. The same crest that would be burned into the box lid was used to seal it with red wax. I took a final stroll around the floor, tracing my fingers over the chilly shelves. After the last test firing, the kiln cooled and ticked. Every surface had been cleaned and every instrument was in its proper position. Never before had the studio appeared so prepared. The woodworker had dropped off the prototype box that afternoon, so I closed the suede flap, placed the envelope on top of the binder, and locked it. It felt like judgment because it weighed precisely 12 pounds. My hands weren't shaking for the first time in years. Every step had landed precisely where it was supposed to. The rim was clean, the walls were drawn high, and the clay was centered. The fire was all that was left. I strolled out into the warm desert night after turning out the light and setting the alarm. 7 days seemed like enough. It was New Year's Eve. In the already starry and black sky, the desert mansion on Cactus Road glistened like a mirage. Surrounded by tiny white lights, a convoy of white Rolls Royces and black SUVs moved up the half-mile driveway, their headlights reaching across saguaros. Doors slammed in perfect time as valets in white coats ran between automobiles. From the vehicle court to the double-height bronze doors, a crimson carpet rolled out, flanked by tall torches that blazed and hissed in the chilly December air. Even though the temperature inside was adjusted to 72 degrees, the energy felt explosive. With white headphones flashing, the DJ, who had been brought in from Los Angeles, stood on a raised platform of smoke mirrors and played a special remix that caused the crystal chandeliers to quake. Like altars, 3 bars glowed. Only the 1998 Dom Perignon from Jeroboam's was poured. Another offered hand-cut glasses of aged Japanese whiskey. The third was a blend of beverages that flashed neon under black light and smoked with dry ice. The acrylic floor over the infinity pool was covered in spinning women wearing midnight sequins and liquid gold. Colored light rippled beneath their heels at each step. With a gold silk column gown and diamonds around her throat, Catherine walked through the crowd like royalty, spreading light like paparazzi flashes while capturing every strobe. She touched too many arms, laughed too loudly, and spoke the same thing to each new face. Biggest party we've ever thrown. Everyone who matters is here tonight. In the cigar lounge, David stood under the enormous iron chandelier. As he guaranteed first-look bargains on the Vegas high-rise and Dubai Marina, he had Cuban smoke curling around his head. Wearing a dark blue peak lapel tuxedo, Lucas worked the investors with a smooth voice and eyes that were eagerly anticipating the next handshake. Olivia lifted her phone high, flashed her diamond choker every time the ring light popped, and posed on the grand staircase with her influencer pack. Slow-motion drone footage of the estate at dusk was shown on an 80-inch screen that dominated the far wall above the double-sided fireplace. Below it, the countdown clock showed 11:27 p.m. The main doors opened for the final time. A courier wearing a fitted black suit and white glove entered with a single item. A black walnut box with shiny brass hinges and a laser-etched Kensington crest in the middle of the lid. Security passed him through immediately after recognizing the pre-approved vendor code. King Proa bowed once and vanished as he placed the box on the white marble console beneath a 7-foot cluster of white orchids. Catherine saw it right away. Her grin grew angular. Oh my goodness. Everyone look. Our little Potter finally remembered us. As if she had won something, she clapped her well-groomed hands. Eva waved a phone rose as a present. With her heels clicking, she took the box herself to the middle of the living room and set it on the ottoman like she was revealing a trophy. Olivia grabbed the thick ribbon of cream. Probably another lopsided bowl will hide in the guest bath. She pulled it out. A 250-page black binder, 2 matte black USB drives tucked in velvet, a sealed cream envelope with red wax, and a charcoal suede lining were all present as the lid lifted with a gentle magnetic sigh. Already somewhat inebriated from his triumph, Lucas rolled his eyes. He took one drive and pushed it into the media center underneath the screen, saying, $10 says it's a sob story video, begging to come home. The drone footage disappeared. The lights in the room automatically went down for the surprise show. The wall was covered in clear 4K wire confirmation on page 1. Grand Cayman account for 30,000 Susan dollars, $409.08 and 87 cents. On page 2, there is an email thread captioned, finalize removal of EV before December 31st. On page 3, there is a trust modification with the bold blue signatures of David and Lucas Kensington. Page 4, stamped receipt of the IRS Form 211 whistleblower acknowledgement. Before someone stopped it, the music continued to pound for 3 complete seconds. Like a guillotine, silence fell. The silence was split apart by Olivia's scream. "Oh my God, we're screwed." Her champagne flute erupted into 1,000 crystal pieces across the travertine after slipping from her manicured fingertips. As though it may bite her, she gazed at the screen. The gold gown was suddenly too tight, so Catherine stepped back. Her knees gave way. Too late, 2 hedge fund wives jumped in. Before hands grabbed her shoulders, her skull thumped dully against the ottoman corner. There was a call for ice. With his face the color of printer paper, David remained motionless, staring at his own signature, which was 10 feet across. His temple vein throbbed so violently that it appeared to be about to rupture. He parted his lips. Nothing was revealed. Elliot had created a 30-second loop for the screen to automatically cycle. The advisor's notes, account numbers, transfer dates, and the line that said, "Submitted to Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division." His wife was already filming on her phone when a tech millionaire in the back muttered, "That's felony stuff." Olivia's abandoned heels skittered across the floor as Lucas stumbled over them and reached for the remote. As the loop continued, he scurried on all fours after it. The guests formed a flawless circle of judgment by taking a step back. The closest exit was blocked by a wall of sequins and tuxedos as Olivia swirled toward it. Each phone was aimed like a weapon at her. Perfect black rivers of mascara began to flow down her face. Gasping, Catherine awoke on the ground and grasped David's ankle. At last he found his voice, rough and raw. A staff member yanked the disc saying, "Turn it off. For the love of God, turn it off." However, the film had been automatically uploaded to one highly public Dropbox link and 30 private stories. At 11:59:40 the countdown clock struck. Nobody approached the terrace to watch the $50,000 fireworks display. The 40-foot glass walls shook in the desert wind. 80 of Arizona's most powerful individuals stood still, witnessing in real time as the Kensington Empire fell apart. And I raised my glass to the moon and waited for the phones to ring 2 hours north, under a different sky. 4 minutes before the world fell apart for them, at 11:57 p.m., my phone began to blow up. I was barefoot on the Sedona Villa's cozy sandstone terrace. Cathedrals made of red rock that glow blood orange in the moonlight. With 1,000 fairy lights strung across the mesquite trees, the infinity pool glistened turquoise. Our private chef had just finished the final meal, which included chocolate spheres sprinkled with gold leaf and caviar spoons, while the mixologist was pouring 2010 crystal freely into classic coupe glasses that glinted in the sunlight like prisms. The contact photo of Olivia, laughing in a bikini on a cruise 5 years ago, flashed first. I left it ringing till it went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, Lucas's followed. The same outcome. Then Catherine called. A Botox-smooth smile from a charity gala freezes her face. I did nothing but watch the screen pulse on the teak table. The last name to appear was David's. Just the word, Dad in all uppercase, without a picture. I lifted the phone high so that everyone on the terrace could hear me, swiping aside the speaker button. Behind me, Grace, Ben, Lily, Max, and the other 12 members of our selected family arranged themselves in a loose semicircle. Halfway to their lips, champagne flutes paused. The speaker was almost blown out by the noise that erupted through it. It was the first time I had ever heard Dad use such words. "Ava, you psychotic, ungrateful little..." With the exception of the band's soft beat as they warmed up for the countdown, the terrace fell silent. With a single piercing yelp that reverberated off the walls of the canyon, someone behind me genuinely laughed. Next, Catherine's high-pitched, cracked voice pushed its way in. Olivia yelled over her raw and animal voice. Baby, please pick up. Please come home. We can say it was a hoax. We can fix everything. You're still our daughter." Lucas took the measured approach, his voice trembling with barely controlled panic. "You jealous, talentless. You just destroyed everything we worked for. Every top firm in the country is already drafting cease and desists. You'll be in federal prison by spring." Once more David, the businessman, attempting to haggle, but now colder. I waited until the commotion on the other line ran out of oxygen before saying, "Name your number." 12 million, 20. Whatever it takes to make this disappear. The aroma of freedom and juniper filled the air coming from the canyon. I talked slowly, clearly, and arctically as I moved the phone closer to my mouth. The moment that box opened, the Kensington family died. Not injured, not sleeping, dead and buried. And I kept every email, every transfer, and every forged page. The IRS has the originals, your partners have the copies. There is no negotiation table, there is no fix, and there is no more daughter. Listen, because this is the last time any of you will ever hear my voice. You are strangers now, and strangers don't get second chances. Catherine cried incoherently about grandkids she would never meet. No more sister, no more safety net. I will roast in hell, Olivia screamed. As if I still had anything to conceal, Lucas threatened to reveal the financial details of my studio. David's voice cracked as he made one last attempt. I grinned at the moon and said, "You'll regret this for the rest of your life." I hung up the phone. "No, you will." The screen turned dark. I turned the phone off entirely, using my thumbnail to pry out the SIM card and then threw it into the water. With a small plink, it disappeared, engulfed by blue light. With bright eyes, Sarah gave me a brand new flute. We entered through the glass doors and were counted in by the band leader. We all yelled the numbers together, our voices echoing off Cathedral Rock. 12, 11, 10. Our special pyrotechnic squad lit the first shell at 3. At one point, scarlet hearts that bloomed and dripped like slow fire, violet chrysanthemums, and gold cascades exploded in the sky. The sides of the canyon became molten red, gold, and eventually white. Max encircled my shoulders with both arms and shouted something joyful that I couldn't hear over the thunder. With her sequins gleaming like fish scales, Lily leaped into the water while fully clothed. Ben's drone captured everything in 4K for us alone. I held my glass up to the explosions above and drank till my throat was burnt by the bubbles. The champagne tasted like the first day of the rest of my life. Like victory. Like oxygen. I remained on the terrace by myself long after the others had wandered inside to rest on sectionals and guest beds, and the fires in the outdoor pits had burned low. Once more, the ancient and immobile canyons were silent. I whispered softly enough for only the desert to hear, leaning against the warm stone railing. The first certified letter from the IRS appeared on the marble console in the Cactus Roadhouse entryway 4 months later, with the words, "Happy New Year, Kensingtons. Enjoy the consequences." With a shaky hand, David signed for the return, which said, Department of the Treasury, Large Business and International Division. There was a $30 million notice of deficiency for undisclosed offshore income within. 75% of the fraud assessment plus compound interest is the penalty. The entire amount owed is $22,412,000 plus change. 90 days is the payment deadline. 2 weeks later, the joint venture letter of intent for the new marina resort was terminated by the Dubai Sovereign Fund. A one-line email. The Vegas group followed 48 hours later, citing reputational damage, saying, "In light of recent regulatory concerns, we are withdrawing." Overnight, 2 projects worth $500 million in future revenue were completed. Lucas remained CFO for precisely 9 more days. In an emergency meeting, the board unanimously voted him out. He was led out of the building by security carrying his Harvard diploma and a banker's box. For weeks, the open to new opportunities option on his LinkedIn profile remained unchanged. In the same month, Olivia's husband filed for divorce. His lawyer claimed that half of the hidden assets were marital property and included the Cayman Trust documentation with the petition. In order to allow for forensic tracing, the judge blocked all accounts bearing her name. Memberships in country clubs expired. While she was having lunch with women who now pretended not to notice her, the Range Rover was repossessed in the club parking lot. Catherine's social schedule became a cemetery. Her name was taken off the invitation by the co-chairs of the charity gala. Her resignation was discreetly accepted by the board of the Phoenix Art Museum. There was silence in the text chains. Her daily tennis foursome broke up without a single phone contact, and the only notices she got were, "So-and-so has left the group." The 3 were called to grandmother Edith's property in Paradise Valley. She was 91 and still sat perfectly upright in her leather wingback. Across the coffee table, she slid updated estate papers. Olivia, Lucas, Catherine, and David were now listed under one line that had been purposefully left out. Everything was funneled to distant cousins, including the foundation, the ranch, the commercial holdings, and 3 animal rescue groups. "You tried to steal from your own blood. Blood remembers," was Edith's succinct closing statement. 6 weeks later, the house itself was listed for sale. Despite being 20% less expensive than comparable properties, the listing photographs featured the same marble console, infinity pool, and vistas of red rock. Since everyone in town was aware of the story, buyers lowballed and circled like vultures. In 4 months, David became 10 years old. His temples' silver turned white. At lunch, Catherine began taking Valium. Lucas stopped answering the door after relocating to a 2-bedroom condo close to Camelback. Olivia never returned after taking a plane to a Costa Rican healing retreat. New building cranes no longer had the Kensington name. The old signage came down. The family crest was removed from the newly printed letterhead. The fall of the empire was not an overnight event. Slowly, painfully, and in public it bled out, and the desert remained silent the entire time. By the end of summer I had 6 crates of greenware in the cargo hold of a one-way aircraft to New York. What years of silent labor could not do, the controversy had placed my name in places I never paid to be. Every art blog from London to Seoul suddenly featured 12 pieces from a little show I had done in a Phoenix warehouse the previous winter, which was invite only. The headlines that used to read, "Kensington heiress exposes family fraud," were replaced with phrases like, "She's one of the most exciting ceramicists working today." The director of Gallery Vert in Soho, Elela Nenamaro, sent an email 3 weeks after the story emerged. She had flown to Phoenix the following day, strode around my studio in 5-inch heels without flinching at the clay dust, and immediately offered an exclusive 3-year deal. Subject line, "We would be honored." A 3,200 square foot bare loft on West 26th had rent paid. When I landed, there were already 2 gas kilns, a slab roller, and a ventilation system that money couldn't ordinarily purchase. In September, I relocated. Every morning, as I hurled the first new forms of my life without a last name I detested, the Hudson shimmered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Collectors who had previously abandoned me now pleaded for places on the waiting list. Loans were requested by museums. My prices tripled, then tripled once again. It didn't feel like retaliation. It just seemed like gravity was finally on my side. A certified envelope showed up at the gallery counter one gloomy November afternoon. The Scottsdale legal firm's return address. David Kensington sent it. After signing for it, the receptionist carried it upstairs. I recognized the flawless, haughty script on the front. I didn't open it. On the 30th, I went to the post office, scrawled "refused, returned to sender" in black marker across the seal. And then I dropped it back into the system. I would never hear from any of them again after that. Winter arrived early. I loaded the new 50-foot kiln for its maiden firing on the first day of actual snowfall. 50 pieces, enormous plates in ash white and iron red bowls so thin they sounded like bells, towering bottles with shattered desert glazes. I closed the heavy door, set the program for cone 10, and hit the start button. Through the peephole, the elements radiated an orange glow. The city was muffled by the snow outside. The kiln screamed like a silent beast inside. After pouring one mug of coffee, I went to the window and observed the flakes floating across the Hudson. For weeks my phone sat on the sill with its screen turned to black. I took it in my hands, pressed the power button till the apple came up one last time, and then let it die. Just the gentle click of a chapter ending forever. No ceremony, no speech. The kiln reached temperatures above 2,000 degrees. I reflected on everyone who had ever told me that I was squandering my life. Since the pottery shed behind the mansion was the one spot no one followed, I thought of the young girl who used to hide there. The woman standing here now was on my mind. In lieu of inheritance provisions, the studio paid for concerts that were sold out through 2030 and placed names on waiting lists. And I realized the one important truth. Once you know how to make your own table, you won't need theirs. When your work speaks louder than their money ever did, you don't need their approval. When you provide love to yourself, you don't need their affection. The kiln made a beeping sound. The cycle is finished. Hours later I opened the door to flawless shelves of fire-kissed clay that were stronger, harder, and more exquisite than anything they had ever come into contact with. Whispering to everyone, I grinned at the glow. This is the result of burning down the door instead of requesting entry. Eva Kensington vanished forever on that day. And Eva just started. At Christmas, my sister got a vacation. I got expired coupons. Mom said, be more like her. Next morning, they woke up to a for sale sign in the yard. I'm Ryan. I'm 30 years old and I suppose you could say I've always been the easy child. You know the type. Quiet, dependable, and never created a scene. He always made care to clean up after himself. They didn't ask for much. He maintained good grades, got a job early, paid his way through college, and didn't protest when things weren't fair since what's the purpose, right? That was me, Ryan. The easygoing son you could rely on, but only when it was convenient. I used to believe that was something to be proud of. Now I am not so sure. On the surface, I grew raised in what appears to be an idyllic household. Every year we had 2 parents, 2 siblings, a well-kept yard, and matching Christmas pajamas for the yearly photo that my mom would post with the message, grateful beyond words. My mother, Beth, is the type of woman who views Instagram as a religion and appearances as doctrine. My father, John, mainly avoided the ruckus, preferring his carpentry shed and ESPN to any genuine emotional engagement. He's the stereotypical checked-out suburban father, present yet absent, if that makes sense. My older sister, Sophia, is 33 and has always been the focus of attention. Blonde, effervescent, popular, the sort that has wine parties for her girlfriends and says things like, I just feel like I'm vibing so hard this year. And then there is Lucas, my younger brother. He's 27. My mother considers me a bit of a golden boy. Always creating messes and being applauded for trying. Even when he failed horribly, he kept changing jobs, hobbies, and girlfriends. But Beth always found a way to frame it as his discovering himself. Meanwhile, I've been quietly working in the background for years, operating a tiny but growing software consultancy that I started from scratch. I own my home outright. I pay my taxes. I don't have temper tantrums or show up to family gatherings inebriated. You'd think that would mean something. However, this is not true in my family. For as long as I can remember, Christmas has been Beth's Olympics. She arranges everything with military precision, beginning in October, with matching decor themes, color-coded present wrap, themed dinners, and of course, the grand unwrapping, in which each guest receives their gifts one at a time so Beth can film our emotions. When we were young, it was wonderful. When we were teenagers, it was a custom. As adults, it's more of a performing ritual, with my mother playing director, audience, and star. And each year, I managed to persuade myself that this time would be different, that this time she'll recognize me for who I am, not just as the reliable or quiet one, but as her son, Ryan. But it wasn't until this past Christmas that I finally cracked. It started like it always did. I came on the 22nd, precisely as requested, neither early nor late. Sophia was already there, lying on the couch in identical loungewear and sipping from an ice-filled glass. She welcomed me with an air kiss and a confused, "Hey you," as if I were someone she dimly recalled from high school. Lucas arrived an hour later with his new girlfriend, Lily, who wore enormous sunglasses inside and chatted in TikTok catchphrases. Beth had set up the guest rooms with monogrammed pillowcases for everyone but me. Mine just stated, guest. I spotted it immediately but didn't say anything. I never do. Dinner was stressful, as only family dinners can be. Sophia discussed her forthcoming trip to Tulum with her influencer buddies. Lucas spoke about a cryptocurrency he was about to make a fortune off of. And I simply sat there, nodding sometimes and sipping my wine, wondering how I could constantly feel like an outsider in my own family. At one point Beth turned to me and said, "Ryan, you're so quiet. You really need to put yourself out there more. Learn to shine." I smiled tightly. "Mom, I operate my own firm." She dismissed it as if I had just informed her I had learned how to fold a fitted sheet. "Okay, yeah. Your tiny techie thing. But I mean something serious." Sophia snorted into her wine glass. Lucas laughed too loudly. I excused myself earlier that night. Christmas morning dawned with the customary pomp. Beth prepared her renowned cinnamon buns. The fireplace raged, the tree lights twinkled, and the presents were heaped high in color-coded stacks, complete with hand-lettered tags and bows large enough to serve as hat. We went through the regular rituals. Beth directs, and we act. Sophia went first. She opened a fancy purse, a spa weekend certificate, and the grand prize, a vacation to Paris. First rate, 5-star hotel. Beth smiled since you had been so anxious recently. Sophia shouted and wept, hugging Beth as if she had just been given a kidney. Then it was Lucas's turn. He received a Rolex, an authentic Rolex. Beth added, I just felt like you needed something to remind you of your potential. Lucas, who has no work and once unintentionally set fire to his flat with a hot plate, smiled and gave her a high five. Then it was my time. I already knew not to expect much. I never did. But even when I opened the gift bag with my name on it, which was substantially smaller than everyone else's, I felt the pain. Inside was a plastic-wrapped bundle of outdated coupons, largely for local businesses that had closed. A pizza place that had closed down previous spring. A 10% discount card for a gym that I had never heard of. There are a few crumpled receipts in the bottom, as if the bag was reused from the prior year. I gazed at it for a second, unsure if it was a joke. Then I glanced up. Beth had already moved on. Well, Ryan, she murmured without meeting my gaze. You've never been one for gifts. You're not the type of person who makes an effort. That was one foolish phrase. I'm not sure what occurred inside me, but something snapped. Maybe it was because she said it so nonchalantly. Perhaps it was the fact that no one blinks. Perhaps 20 years of ingesting the same bitter medicine had finally caught up with me. I let out a real chuckle, not angry or sarcastic, just empty. I put down the present bag, stood up and muttered, yeah, I guess not. Then I went to bed. But the next morning, when they all came downstairs, anticipating more cinnamon buns and forced joy, they were confronted with something quite different. Silence. My automobile was gone. My room was vacant. A large for sale sign stood out on the snow-dusted yard, just where Dad's handcrafted reindeer decorations used to be. And I had not just walked away from the house. I walked away from everything. When I say they had no notion, I really mean it. None of them saw it coming. For the first time in my life, I was the one who planned the surprise. And I did not do it for acclaim or recognition. I did it because I had finally reached the point where being silent and being the easy child was no longer an option. But before I go into that morning and all that followed, I need to backtrack a little since the treachery did not begin on Christmas. It had barely reached boiling point that day. The reality is, it had been boiling for years, long enough to persuade me that it wasn't simply neglect or favoritism. It was something deeper, crueler, and it was cleverly disguised as love. Let me go back to the summer before Christmas. I just got the largest customer of my career. My team was assisting a logistics firm with the transition of their complete back-end system. Yes, my team of 12 engineers and designers was brought on to lead the project. It meant hard hours, a lot of stress, and a large paycheck. When I finally signed the final deal, I informed Beth, not because I wanted a parade, but because I hoped she would be delighted for me. Maybe even say something maternal like, I'm proud of you. But she didn't. Her precise comments were, oh, logistics, like trucks. That doesn't sound very glamorous, but I'm glad you're staying busy. Sophia, on the other hand, had recently launched an online store selling rebranded dropship jewelry at a 400% markup. Beth organized a backyard launch party for her, replete with bespoke cupcakes and a photographer. Lucas had failed the real estate exam for the second time, but Beth nevertheless posted a photo of him with the message, proud of this guy for never giving up on his dreams. I remarked simply, nice job, and Beth removed my comment, claiming it damaged the aesthetic. But it did not end there. My cousin Adam was getting married in October, and Beth insisted the entire family come. I flew here from Chicago, paid for my own hotel, and even upgraded Beth's rental car after it was reduced last minute. Sophia and Lucas both came late and unprepared, but were applauded for their efforts. I offered to help set up the decorations and was given a broom. At supper, my name was not even listed on the family seating plan. I ended myself seated next to the DJ, who was the first person all night to inquire about what I did for a job. After the wedding, I attempted one last time to have a genuine talk with Beth. We were sitting alone on her porch, with the sun sinking behind the bushes. She was always meticulously groomed. I gently asked her why I always felt like the odd one out, and why she never seemed to care what I was doing. She drank her wine and added, you were always so independent, Ryan. You never needed us the way your siblings did. You made it clear you didn't want to be a part of all this. It was as if everything was sacrosanct, and I had willingly walked outside the circle. As if her rejection to include me was my decision. But something inside me moved as I nodded and whispered, okay. I was not sad. I was not furious. I was finished. Then came December, 1 week before Christmas. I informed Beth that I would be taking someone with me to supper. Her name was Emily. We weren't serious, but we'd been seeing one other for a few months, and I figured it would be good to have someone on my side for once. Beth's response. Oh, well, that's short notice. Are you sure she'll feel comfortable? We have a vibe we like to keep. Retain in mind that this is the same woman who has allowed Lucas to bring a new female every Christmas since college. Some didn't even spend the night. Once, his companion left midway through dinner to go to a bar and never returned. But bringing Emily was inconvenient. I told Beth not to worry. We would stay in a hotel. She did not react. On Christmas Eve, Emily and I arrived on time. Sophia and Lucas were already present, as predicted. Beth welcomed Emily with a frozen grin and a once-over that made her cheeks blush. During supper, Beth's questions were all addressed at Sophia or Lucas. Every time Emily tried to speak, Beth would interrupt or deflect the conversation. Lucas made a joke about my profession involving routers and cables, and Beth laughed so hard she almost dropped her wine. I looked across at Emily. She flashed me a strained smile. Later she muttered, "Is it always like this?" I replied, "Worse." We departed early that night and waited in the car outside the hotel for a time. Emily was silent. I could see she was looking for the proper words. She eventually stated, "I think your mom actually resents you." I didn't fight. She was not mistaken. Christmas morning unfolded just as I had described. The trip to Paris, the Rolex, the expired coupons, and that one line shattered me. "Well, you never really put in the effort." Strike. Let me explain anything about effort. I've been putting forth effort since I was 13 years old, assisting John in repairing the leaking garage roof so Lucas wouldn't miss his soccer trial. I worked hard when I skipped prom to work a double shift at the diner so I could save for college. I put out effort every time I sent flowers on Mother's Day, even though I knew she'd share Sophia's breakfast instead. Last summer I worked hard to help John build the deck in 90-degree heat while Lucas sat inside playing Xbox. Effort was the only way I was able to leave that place with my sanity intact. So, when they laughed and Beth dismissed me like a ghost, I walked to bed, followed by Emily, who held my hand in that silent manner that conveys everything without saying a word. We didn't get much sleep. Instead, I lie there looking at the ceiling, rehashing every slight, insult, and missed moment. That night, I realized something. I'd spent my entire life attempting to gain a place at a table that was never set for me. And maybe it was time to flip the table over. I got up before daybreak. Emily awoke, but I told her to fall back asleep. I snuck out of the hotel room and drove back home, gliding like a ghost through the dark streets. I parked a block away so they couldn't hear. I let myself in using the spare key, which they still hadn't replaced. The living area was a jumble of wrapping paper and half-emptied wine glasses. I stepped over a fallen stocking and walked straight to the closet. The deed was located within. What Beth didn't know, and no one else in the home did, was that John had secretly transferred ownership of the house to me 5 months before. It wasn't because of guilt. It was not even out of love. It was for practical reasons. He had fallen delinquent on his second mortgage. The house was almost in default. I paid off every penny. In exchange, he signed it over. He knew Beth would never let it happen, so he never told her. He told her a falsehood about refinancing. She didn't ask any questions. She never did when there was money involved. I promised him I'd keep it till the moment was right. And Christmas morning seemed like just the right time. I contacted the real estate agent while driving back to the motel. I did not hesitate. I instructed him to list it immediately. And then I texted my attorney. That is what they awoke to. The home was vacant, and my room had been stripped of everything I had ever left behind. A for sale sign on the front yard was staked deep into the frozen grass, like a flag on conquered territory. But I wasn't finished yet. One more betrayal awaited. One more twist would make everything perfectly plain. And that is when the letter arrived. For the first several days after leaving, I didn't hear anything. There were no texts, missed calls, or "where are you" messages, only stillness. It was nearly humorous in a negative manner. After everything I'd done and been to that family, my unexpected absence barely registered. Or perhaps it did, and they simply didn't know how to respond. Perhaps Beth was too surprised and proud of herself to seek out. Perhaps she didn't believe I was worth pursuing. But I knew that the stillness would not continue. I had started too huge a fire for them to ignore indefinitely. The main storm struck on the 4th day, shortly after New Year's. I was at my Chicago apartment, sitting at my desk, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Emily had returned to her house the night before, seeking some time to unwind after the Christmas chaos. We hadn't broken up or anything. Just halted. That was the word she said. Hesitated. She stated that she wanted to learn how I handled suffering before she could commit to something more serious. I did not argue. She was not mistaken. I was enjoying my coffee when the first phone arrived. Sophia. I did not pick up. Then Lucas. I let it ring. Then Beth left a voicemail. "Ryan, this isn't funny. Your brother and sister are devastated. Your father is furious. I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, but this is not how family behaves. We need to talk. Call me." That was the last straw. No apologies. "Are you okay?" There is no attempt to comprehend. Only a demand and an allegation. I blocked that number. By the end of the week, I was receiving texts from extended family members, cousins, aunts, and folks I hadn't spoken to in years. All variations of the same script. "Your mom is heartbroken. This is too much even for you. You can't sell their house, Ryan." As if I'd ripped the rug out from under a couple of innocent retirees instead of regaining the one thing I'd ever been given authority over. I did not react to any of them. Instead, I relocated. I grabbed the boxes I had been packing and signed a lease for a modest brick townhouse near the river. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, large windows, and a crooked narrow staircase. But it was mine. Most importantly, it felt like me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was apologizing simply for being. The first several weeks were difficult though. I'm not going to claim I recovered overnight. I felt like I was floating in limbo, half guilty, half relieved, all muddled up in a fog of feelings I couldn't sift out. I kept asking myself if I had overreacted. Was it actually that bad? Was I simply overly sensitive? But then I would recall Christmas morning. That bag. that phrase, and how they laughed. That would remove the fog very quickly. Work helped. I poured myself into the firm, taking on more clients and hiring 2 more developers. We moved into a modest downtown office space, a second-floor walk-up, with poor lighting but high activity. The type of environment where you could create something meaningful. Things began to snap into place gradually and silently. I would get up early, run by the river, eat breakfast, check my email, buy plants, hang art, and make my room a home. On weekends I'd visit an independent bookstore in Logan Square that offered live readings, and I began journaling. At first it felt silly. I would sit there with my leather-bound notepad looking at the page as if it owed me something. But suddenly the words began to appear. Memories, ideas, and seemingly little occurrences clung to me like vines. For example, when I fractured my arm in 6th grade, Beth had me walk home because she suspected I was faking it so I could miss gym. Or when I got into my first choice college and all she said was, "Well, don't get cocky, a lot of people drop out." Or when I offered to pay for Thanksgiving dinner and she said, "That's sweet, Ryan, but we'll let your brother handle it. He needs the confidence boost." I jotted everything down. Every fracture, bruise, and subtle rejection had influenced how I regarded myself. And then, about a month after I departed, something unusual occurred. I was sitting at the office reviewing finances when my phone vibrated with a LinkedIn notice. "Beth Forrester recommends you for team management." I gazed at the screen for a full minute before laughing out. Not because it was hilarious, but because it was so true to the brand. My mother couldn't be bothered to contact me and ask how I was doing, but she could go to LinkedIn and click a button that claimed I was good at managing people. I did not click back. But that night, I documented it in my diary. My mother's compliments have always been like breadcrumbs in a wilderness. Just enough to make you believe you're not lost, but never enough to bring you home. With that, I flipped the page. March has here, both literally and symbolically. And with it, a deluge of legal paperwork. Beth and John had finally understood I wasn't lying. The home was listed. Offers were coming in. My lawyer, Lily, a lady I met via a business relationship and instantly grew to admire, handled the majority of the logistics. But one day she phoned me with an unusual tone in her voice. "I got a package today," she explained. "Addressed to you from your mother." She hesitated. "Do you want it forwarded?" she said. I agreed. It came 2 days later. A manila envelope. There was no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting. Inside was an untyped letter. Not tidy. Simply scribbled ink on ripped notebook paper. Beth's voice is there in every syllable. "Ryan, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but you've made your point. You've embarrassed our family, harmed your siblings, and your father doesn't know what to say to you anymore. You always behaved like you were above us, and now I see it was true. But don't forget who raised you. Don't forget who fed you, who gave you a roof, who bought your first suit, and who drove you to job interviews before you had a car. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I did my best, and this is how you repay me. You want to be alone? Fine, but don't come back when you realize what you've lost. No apologies, no accountability, just one final twist of the knife." I kept the letter in a drawer, not to keep it, but to convince myself that I wasn't insane. I believe that was the lowest point. Not the stillness, the wrath, or even the loneliness. It was evidence that my mother, whom I had spent decades attempting to impress, would never change. Not for me, not for anyone. However, there are advantages to being at rock bottom. There is nowhere left to fall. Spring arrived, and with it, a surprise transformation. I started going to therapy. Emily supported me, even though we hadn't really reunited. She was cautious and compassionate. She would occasionally check in to see how I was doing. I've never lied. I told her it was difficult, but I was working on it. My therapist is Dr. Martin was a calm woman with silver hair and an assortment of owl-shaped mugs. She didn't say much at first, simply asked probing questions that went deeper than I expected. What did you want your mother to say when you presented her your business plan? What did her approval signify to you? Who are you striving to become? Who are you still trying to prove wrong? I'd sit in that office once a week, peeling back layers I hadn't realized I had. Shame, remorse, and the bizarre belief that I was only worthwhile when I was productive. That affection had to be acquired again, much like a perverse subscription service. However, with each session, the weight gradually began to lift. Not all at once, but rather in pieces. I started saying no more frequently. I started emphasizing rest. I started establishing boundaries, and when I did so, I realized how much of my life I'd wasted trying to be someone else's concept of good. I stopped doing it. I came into my own. By May, the house was sold. I did not go back to clear it out. I hired a service. I mailed the final documentation to Beth and John through the lawyer. I did not leave a note. I did not say farewell. I didn't know them very well. But I did preserve one thing. A photograph. I was 9 years old when I stood in front of the fireplace, carrying a science fair prize. There was no one else in the image save myself, beaming like if I had finally been noticed. I framed it and displayed it on my new bookcase, next to the plant Emily sent me before Christmas. She visited again in June. We spoke for hours. This time there was no respite. There was only us, and there was tranquility. But the past has a strange way of reappearing just when you think you've avoided it. Because many weeks later, I received a call from an unknown number. I did not recognize the voice at first. "Ryan, it's Dad." He sounded worn and aged, like if something had snapped. "I need to talk to you," he said. "It's about your sister." And with that, the past came calling. I hadn't heard my father's voice in months. Not since the hazy turmoil of Christmas. When I saw an unfamiliar caller appear on the screen, I almost let it ring out of habit. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was the subtle thrum of closure that had begun to emerge within me after so many months away. Whatever it was, I took it up. And for the first 5 seconds, neither of us talked. Then, "Ryan, it's Dad." His voice wasn't what I recalled. John Forrester was not an expressive man. Stoic, measured, the type of person who sat at the dinner table with a fork in one hand and a newspaper in the other. But there was a fracture in his voice now, a hollowness, as if the foundation had finally broken beneath the weight of years of pretending. "I need to talk to you," he said. "It's about your sister." I didn't say anything immediately. A part of me wanted to hang up. Another portion, perhaps the one that still had that childish glimmer of optimism, remained on the line. "She's in trouble, Ryan," he explained. "Real trouble." I took a deep breath and leaned against my office's cold window. "What kind of trouble?" "She took money," he explained. "From your mother." "From me?" I blinked. "What do you mean, took money?" He moaned. "She told us she was investing it. Said it was part of her boutique expansion. Something about influencers and ad budgets. Your mother gave her full access to the joint account, and now it's all gone." I closed my eyes. "Of course." "How much?" John paused. "Nearly 65,000. I said nothing. I did not have to. The quiet provided its own form of proof. She used it to purchase followers, write bogus reviews, and pay a consultant who vanished. The boutique has died. She did not even renew the website domain. And now your mother is in a panic because the mortgage on their new Florida condo has fallen through. And well, I think she's starting to realize that the house was the only real safety net we had." "So now she wants to talk?" I inquired. "Now that Sophia turned out to be a bad investment?" "She doesn't know I'm calling," he whispered gently. That astonished me. "I'm not asking you to fix this," he said. "I just thought you should know." I didn't respond. I felt my chest constrict. Not with terror, but with purpose. When you've been underestimated throughout your life, something inside you clicks. Not out of wrath or hate, but out of clarity. You see the entire board for the first time. You see how the pieces were constantly set against you. And how, if you move wisely, you may completely turn the game on its head. The moment had arrived. I hung up without promising anything. But for the next 2 hours, I stared at the wall, connecting dots in my head. The home was gone. The safety net was gone. Sophia had spent every dollar like it was monopoly money. And now the cracks were too large to paint over. The family was exposed. I had resources, knowledge, and leverage. All I needed was the appropriate timing and a strategy. The next day I called Emily. "Are you busy?" I inquired. "Depends," she answered. "Are we talking emotionally or logistically?" "Both," I said. "But I need a partner." There was a pause. "For what?" Emily said gently. "Something surgical." "That's your way of saying revenge, isn't it?" I didn't argue. We met that night at her place. She had Thai cuisine prepared and a whiteboard retrieved from her closet, as if we were preparing a heist, which we were. "Okay," she said, wiping her hands. "Walk me through it." I told her everything. The call from John, the money, the boutique collapse, the condo fallout, Beth's quiet, Sophia's devastation. I even showed her the letter Beth had penned in wrath, which was still nestled in my drawer like a relic from a dead faith. Emily took it all in and nodded slowly. "So, what do you want to do?" she inquired. "I want to make them face it," I told them. "Not just the financial part, the real part, the rot, the favoritism, the manipulation. I want them to feel what it's like to be on the outside for once. I want to take away the illusion." Emily cocked her head, folding her arms. "That's a lot of therapy undone in one sentence." I cracked a joke. "I'm not doing it out of spite." She arched an eyebrow. "Well, it's not just spite," I explained. "That night we started working on the plan. It wasn't about hacking bank accounts or destroying lives. That was not my style. My strategy was quieter, wiser, and more lasting. Step 1. Acquire allies. Over the years I'd maintained contact with a few cousins and other family members who had also felt the pain of Beth's partiality. Danny, who married last fall, was number 1 on my list. She once told me at her reception that Beth had attempted to persuade her parents not to allow me offer a toast because I was too serious and would ruin the atmosphere. I contacted Danny. "Want to help me expose a family lie?" She responded 2 minutes later. "I've been waiting for this moment my entire life." The second step is the engagement celebration. That was the key. Sophia and her new partner, a dentist named Bryce, were organizing an engagement party for early July. Beth had already bragged about it on social media. Save the date. #FutureBright, grin, or some similarly ridiculous hashtag. The guest list comprised distant cousins, high school pals, and a few local figures Sophia had bribed into attending. The celebration was going to be hosted in a rented event location just outside the city. Classy, stylish, and much over their current budget, Beth was most likely covering it in the hopes of eliciting pity and maybe a bailout from relatives who hadn't heard about the boutique tragedy. Perfect. Step 3, the slideshow. Emily came up with that section. We decided that if we were going to divulge the truth, we would do so in Beth's favorite way, with a carefully orchestrated, photo-filled, emotionally manipulative presentation. Only ours would differ. We began gathering receipts, screenshots, public bankruptcy filings under Sophia's LLC, Yelp complaints from irate customers, emails provided by the consultant Sophia had hired, and a phantom email account created only 2 weeks before the collapse. Danny sent over old family group conversations in which Beth commended Sophia for leading the next generation of women in business while dismissing my job as tech things for introverts. We gathered it all and arranged it into a timeline. Emily handled the design. Slick, minimal, and lethal. The last slide shows a snapshot of the overdraft joint account. Balance minus $212.37. Caption: This is what favoritism buys. Step 4, delivery. I RSVP'd to the engagement celebration with a companion. Emily. We arrived fashionably late, dressed to kill, with nothing but a flash drive in a very calm manner. Beth seemed startled to see me. Sophia seemed annoyed. Lucas, who had seemingly discovered God, Bitcoin, or both in the last several months, appeared to want to disappear. Ryan, Beth murmured, air kissing me. Didn't think you'd make it. I figured it was time to reconnect, I confessed. Besides, I brought a little something. I handed her the flash drive. She blinked. What's this? A gift, I inquired. Emily grinned behind me. Beth paused. It's a surprise. She grinned as she noticed others observing. All right, she said. Let's plug it in. The projector was already set up. The lighting was decreased. The audience quieted. Beth stepped up to the microphone, clinking her champagne glass. Before we continue with the speeches, my firstborn has a little something to share. The phrase fell with its customary sting, but this time I grinned. The slideshow started. The first few slides were typical. Childhood photographs. Sophia performs ballet. Sophia wore braces. Sophia is presenting a bogus diploma during her boutique's debut celebration. Then came the change. Bank transfers. Empty shops. Emails. Receipts. Voicemails from creditors. And then the overdraft screen. Silence. You could hear a fork dropping. Literally someone dropped one. Sophia went crimson, and then white. Beth's face froze. John, standing to the side, closed his eyes. And me? I just watched. Not with brutality, but with closure. But the night hadn't ended. Because as Beth grabbed for the laptop to pull the cord, a second folder titled Inheritance emerged on the screen. And that was the unexpected twist. When the second folder, called Inheritance, appeared, you could feel the entire room tighten like a strained muscle. It was only one phrase hidden in the corner of the screen in Emily's crisp white script, yet it resonated around the room like thunder. Beth's hand froze halfway to the laptop, her acrylic nails lingering over the keyboard. Her eyes met me, wide and keen, full of something between fright and wrath. Ryan, she answered. Don't you dare, but I'd already done it. Emily, bless her, cool as ever. She opened the folder using the remote she had placed into her coat pocket. The initial document was a scanned PDF of the amended will. My grandfather's will, the original one, which Beth had secretly attempted to amend over a decade ago. See, I haven't informed you about this small bit of history. My grandpa, Beth's father, was one of the few family members to see me. You really saw me. He'd been a quiet, bright man with a dry sense of humor and a tendency to listen more than speak. I used to spend summers assisting Dad in his garage workshop, passing him tools as he taught me how to mend things without hurrying. He loved me in a manner that Beth never could, with presence rather than pretense. When he died during my final year of college, the will reading was brief, straightforward, and oddly opportune. Beth informed us that Dad had given her the home, Lucas a little trust for growth, and Sophia a string of treasures for future generations. I got a watch, an old broken watch, no bank account, no mention of our summers together, just a quiet slap on the back and a trip back to school. But a year ago, when visiting an old storage facility where my grandpa used to store his books and equipment, I discovered something stuck in a manila envelope glued to the underside of an ancient desk drawer. It was dated 5 months before his death, notarized, and witnessed. A signed modification to the will that identified me as the only beneficiary of his estate, which included his home, securities, and a significant sum stored in a savings account I had no idea existed. Beth, for whatever reason, had never discovered this copy. I had the option of going to court right away, but I chose not to. Not yet. Not till today. Emily presented everything in order, slide after slide. The concealed revision, the notarization, and the fact that Beth submitted a different version mere weeks after his death. A version with a signature that, upon closer examination by a hired forensic handwriting analyst, did not quite match. Not enough to send her to prison, but enough to leave a long, damning shadow. Enough to shake bones. Enough to humiliate. Gasps echoed around the room. Whispers. John. Became ghostly white. Lucas seems to have had the floor torn out from under him. Sophia. Sophia began weeping. Beth, however, attempted to remain composed. Her voice rose, shaky yet piercing. That's enough. That document is fake. My father never would have... Would you have what? I said, coming forward. Left something to the only person who didn't treat him like a stepping stone. The only one who didn't ask for money every time we visited. You don't understand how this family works, Ryan, she said, her voice soaring over the muttering. You're not part of this. You never were. You never tried. You think a slideshow full of old receipts and dusty PDFs is going to change anything? This family isn't built on paperwork. It's built on loyalty, on history, and you walked out. I didn't walk out, I explained, my voice quiet but clear. You pushed me out, and now I'm just choosing to stay out on my own terms. I could have dropped the mic right there, but I wasn't done. Because here's the issue about Beth. Her greatest weapon was control. Control over perception, emotion, and the carefully managed picture she presented to the world. And I understood in my bones that the true penalty was not a loss of money, possessions, or even respect. It was public and unambiguous exposure. So I did one final thing. I handed Emily the microphone. She cleared her throat, smiled at the puzzled and startled audience, and added, "For those of you wondering what this was all about, don't worry. We've uploaded the full presentation to a private link. You'll find it in your emails. It'll stay active for 48 hours. And then we departed. We did not wait for their reactions. We did not remain for the spin. I did not owe them my time. And I certainly did not owe them my attendance. I took Emily's hand and stepped out the front doors of that pricey leased event facility into the cool evening air. It was like stepping out of a thick coat that I'd been wearing my entire life. The repercussions came quickly. 3 days later I received a voicemail from John. Just John. No, Beth. Ryan. I just wanted to say you were right about everything. I don't know if it matters, but I'm sorry. I should have stepped in a long time ago. I should have seen it. I don't expect you to call back. Just take care of yourself. I did not return the call, but I did preserve the message. Lucas also messaged me. A poor apology hidden among crypto quotations and weak efforts at self-deprecation. Funny. I left him on red. Sophia disappeared from social media for a month. When she returned, the engagement was called off. Bryce had reportedly dropped the night of the slideshow. They probably couldn't take the truth. Or perhaps he recognized the woman he was marrying was not who she claimed to be. Her boutique account was suspended. The bogus followers were wiped off. Her personal page, which had previously been packed with hashtags and modest brags, was suddenly disturbingly quiet. Beth didn't call. She did not write. But I heard from Adam, who heard from Rachel, that Beth and John sold their Florida condo before they moved in and downsized. Beth attempted to sell it as embracing simplicity, but her family knew. The whispers began. She'd lost the story, and she despised it more than anything. Meanwhile, I survived. I took a breath. I thrived. The company reached a new milestone that summer. We expanded into 2 more cities and signed our largest corporate customer ever. I traveled to Lisbon with Emily. No emails or phones, just sunlight, street music, and slow meals by the ocean. We laughed like children. We spoke like adults. And in between the cobblestone lanes and rooftop cafes, she expressed her desire to establish a life with me. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I no longer did. In the fall, I received an invitation to Thanksgiving. Not from Beth, but from Adam. "We're doing something new this year," she informed me. "Small dinner. Real people. You in?" I brought Emily. I brought wine. I brought tranquility. We ate. We laughed. We shared tales. Nobody interrupted. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody remarked, "You're being too serious." For the first time in my life, I felt at home. Not because of blood, but because of kinship. At one point, Adam lifted his glass and stated to Ryan, "For teaching us all that you don't have to burn down your life to be free. Sometimes you just have to stop building on top of someone else's lies." There were tears. Good ones. Later that night, while Emily and I were walking back to the vehicle under the streetlights, she glanced at me and remarked, "You know, you never really got revenge." I paused. "No," I said, smiling. "What would you call that?" She shakes her head. "That wasn't revenge. That was liberation." And maybe she was correct. Because vengeance means getting even. But everything I did was about getting out.